My biological son tried to kill me with a box of poisoned chocolates, and I, completely unaware, accidentally saved my own life, simply because I made my daughter-in-law and my grandkids jealous. When he called, his voice trembling, he asked, "Mom, have you eaten the chocolates yet?" I answered innocently, "Not yet." I gave them to Emily and the kids. The silence on the other end was terrifying. Then he screamed, like a man in despair. "What did you just say?" At that moment, I didn't understand why Ryan, my son, was so panicked. I thought he was just upset that I had given his birthday gift to someone else. How naive I was. My name is Lisa Montgomery. I'm 77 years old, and I live in the quiet suburbs of Portland, Oregon. For 40 years, I sacrificed everything for my son, my youth, my dreams, even my last dollar. I adopted Ryan when he was only 2, after his biological parents died in a car accident. I gave him my last name, my home, and unconditional love for all my life. But on my 64th birthday, everything changed forever. That morning, I received a beautifully wrapped box of handmade chocolates, along with a handwritten note: "To the best mother in the world. Love, Ryan." Tears filled my eyes. It had been months since I'd received any gesture of affection from him. Ever since he married Emily, everything had turned cold. Emily entered our lives like a storm, tearing apart everything I thought was secure. She whispered venom into Ryan's ear. "Your mom is too nosy, too controlling. You're almost 40, why do you still let her interfere in everything?" And so, Ryan, the boy I once held through countless sleepless nights, slowly drifted away. The visits became rare, the calls became short. Even his hugs turned as cold as an Oregon winter. Still, I waited. I believed a mother's love could overcome anything. That morning, when I received the box of chocolates, my heart warmed again. I thought my son had finally remembered our bond. The glossy, sweet-smelling candies inside the elegant box seemed like a symbol of reconciliation, but as always, I thought of others before myself. I looked at the chocolates and smiled. "The kids will love these."
I and the little ones will be so happy.
I loved my grandchildren, even though Emily never liked me. They were Ryan's flesh and blood, the only pure thing left in this family. I rewrapped the box, got in my car, and drove to my son's house. Emily opened the door wearing that polite, fake smile she always wore. A smile that never reached her cold eyes. "Oh, hi, Mrs. Montgomery. What brings you here?" she said, her tone dripping with superiority. I handed her the box. "Ryan gave this to me for my birthday, but I thought it'd be nice if everyone enjoyed it together." For a brief second, I saw fear flash in her eyes, not surprise, but panic. Then she quickly regained her composure. "How thoughtful. The kids will love it." She didn't invite me in. As usual, she had an excuse ready. "The kids are sleeping. Maybe another day." I drove home, a little sad but strangely at peace. At least I'd done the right thing, sharing my joy on my birthday. That night, I went to bed with a smile. The next morning, the phone rang early. It was Ryan. His voice sounded strained, trembling. "Mom, how were the chocolates?" I was a little surprised. He rarely cared about the gifts he gave. "Oh, I gave them to Emily and the kids. You know how they are, they love sweets." Silence on the other end. Then a heart-rending scream. "What did you do?" His voice broke, part anger, part terror. The panic in his voice made me start to tremble. Why was he afraid I'd eaten the candy? Why was he so desperate when he knew his own family had eaten them? He abruptly hung up. I sat there, my heart pounding, with a horrible premonition. That afternoon, the phone rang again. It was Emily. her voice full of panic. Lisa, the kids were poisoned after eating the chocolates. I had to take them to the hospital. My blood ran cold. I asked, my throat tight. The doctor said it's food poisoning, she answered, choking up. But it's strange. The candies smelled odd when we opened them, and unfortunately the kids had eaten quite a few before we realized. My whole world collapsed. The candies my son had sent, the ones I had given away with all my love, had nearly killed my grandchildren. As if she had finally understood the terrible thing that had been right in front of her all along. That night, I couldn't sleep. The pieces in my head began to click into place. Ryan's frantic reaction, his terror when he learned I hadn't eaten even one. The relief mingled with panic. The rapid, grilling questions. And then, like a lightning bolt in the dark, the truth struck me. My son, the child I loved more than my own life, had tried to kill me. The following days were a living nightmare. My grandchildren, Anna and Luke, were fortunate to survive, thank God. But the doctors said there were traces of arsenic in their blood. A word I had only heard in crime dramas before had become the terrifying reality of my life. Emily, my daughter-in-law, spoke to me for the first time in a trembling, frightened voice, no longer cold as usual. Lisa, I think those chocolates weren't meant to be shared. I think they were prepared. Just for you. Her words confirmed what my heart had suspected, even as my mind tried to deny it. Ryan disappeared. He didn't answer his phone or texts. When Emily went to his workplace to look for him, they said he'd taken emergency leave. He had fled, leaving his wife and children to suffer the consequences of the plot he had hatched. But I knew my son. I knew where he would hide. Whenever cornered, he always ran to my sister Margaret's house. She had spoiled and covered for him since he was young. I drove there, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. 40 years of love. 40 years of sacrifice. 40 years of giving everything. And this was what I received in return. A child who wanted his mother dead. When I knocked, Margaret opened the door, her face full of guilt. Lisa, she whispered, I didn't think you'd come, but I saw Ryan's car parked around the corner. I know he's here, I said, my voice so foreign to my own ears I barely recognized it. Ryan stepped out from behind her. He was gaunt, his eyes hollowed. But what chilled me most was that vacant look, no remorse at all. Why? That was all I could manage to say. Why did you want to kill me? My voice cracked on the last word, kill. And his answer shattered my soul. Because you're in the way, he said, cold as a stranger. You've always been in the way. I need your inheritance, Mom, but you just won't die. I was stunned. So it was all because of money, the money I'd spent a lifetime saving, living frugally to secure his future. You never told me you had that much, he continued, his voice dripping with venom. Last year, when you were in the hospital, I saw your bank papers. $2 million, Mom. $2 million that I need now, not when you're 80. $2 million, the price of 40 years of labor, sweat, and tears. Besides, you're old, he added, casually, as if talking about the weather. What do you even need money for anymore? You've lived enough. I have a family, kids, a future to worry about. Each word was a knife to my heart. Margaret spoke softly. Ryan, say that. She's already lived her life. I answered, my voice trembling with grief and disbelief. A future built on your own mother's death, Ryan? A future paid for with my life? He looked at me as if I were the insane one, selfish for standing in his way. Don't be so dramatic, he said, his tone like ice. It would have been quick. Those chocolates had enough arsenic to make it look like a natural heart attack. No one would ever suspect. You would have gone peacefully in your sleep, and I'd finally get what's rightfully mine. Those words made me realize the full depth of his cruelty. This wasn't a rash act, it was a plan, carefully designed, calculated, and soulless. He had researched the poison, chosen expensive chocolates to mask the smell, and measured the exact dose to kill without detection. My death had been arranged with the same attention to detail I once used to plan his birthday parties. "Why did your perfect plan fail?" I asked, my voice shaking. His face twisted with rage. "Because you're too stupid. Because you always have to share, always have to be the good person, always have to think of everyone else," he screamed, spit flying, his voice breaking with hatred. The very flaw he despised in me, my habit of thinking of others first, was what had saved my life. I'd shared the chocolates with my daughter-in-law and my grandkids, and that act ruined his plan to kill his own mother. The most horrifying part was that Emily now knew everything. Her children had almost died because of that same plan. He blamed me, claiming I was the reason his kids were poisoned. While I stood frozen in Margaret's living room, Emily appeared at the doorway. Her face was pale, tears streaming down her cheeks. She had heard everything. And in that moment, the truth stood bare. The man she loved, the son I had, raised for 40 years, was willing to kill his own mother and sacrifice his own children in the process. Emily sobbed, looking at Ryan. "How could you do this? How could you put our kids in danger like that?" He turned to her with the same coldness he had shown me. "Why not? They weren't supposed to eat them, it was meant for her. Why?" That was all I could say. "Why would you want to kill your mother?" My voice broke on the last word, kill, and his answer tore my soul apart. "Because you're an obstacle," he said, cold as a stranger. "You've always been an obstacle. I need Mom's inheritance, but she just won't die." It was all about money. The money I had painstakingly saved my whole life, living frugally to secure his future. "You didn't even know how much I had," he continued, his voice full of venom. "Last year, when you were in the hospital, I saw the bank papers. $2 million, Mom. $2 million I need now. Not when you're 80. $2 million, the amount that represented 40 years of my work, sweat, and tears. Besides, you're old," he added, casually, as if discussing the weather. "What would you even need money for at your age? You've lived enough. I have a family, kids, a future to think about." Every word was a blade to my heart. Margaret murmured, "Ryan, don't say that." But he shot back, "Aunt." "She's already lived her life," I replied, my voice choked and bitter. "A future built on your mother's corpse, Ryan?" He looked at me as if I were insane, selfishly blocking his path. "Don't be so dramatic," he said, his tone like steel. "It would have been quick. Those chocolates had enough arsenic to look like a natural heart attack. No one would suspect. You would have gone peacefully in your sleep, and I'd have what was rightfully mine." Those words made me fully understand his cruelty. This was not a spur-of-the-moment act. It was a plan, carefully calculated, cold, and inhuman. He had researched the poison, chosen expensive chocolates to mask the smell, and calculated the exact dose to kill without detection. My death had been arranged with the same dedication I had used for planning his birthdays for so many years. "Why did your perfect plan fail?" I asked, my voice trembling. His face contorted with anger. "Because you're too stupid. Because you always have to sacrifice, always be the good one, always share," he screamed, spitting, his voice choked by hate. The very flaw he despised in me, my habit of thinking of others before myself, was precisely what saved my life. I had shared the box of candies with my daughter-in-law and my grandchildren, and that act ruined his plan to kill his mother. Worse still, Emily now knew everything. The children had almost died because of that plot. He blamed me, saying I was the reason his children were poisoned. While I stood frozen in Margaret's living room, Emily appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, tears streaming. She had heard the entire conversation, and in that moment, the truth lay exposed. The man she loved, the son I had raised for 40 years, was ready to kill his own mother and sacrifice his own children in the process. Over, I said, my voice so calm even I was surprised. Everything between us is over. He laughed, a bitter, cruel laugh. What are you going to do? Call the police? Report your own son? You know you won't. You're too weak. Weak for 40 years. For 40 years, I had been too weak to say no, too weak to set boundaries, too weak to see that my unconditional love had turned my son into a monster. But that day, faced with undeniable betrayal, something changed in me. You're right, I answered. I've been weak too, long. But it ends today. Wait and see what a weak woman can do once she finds her strength. His shouts followed me into the street. He called me ungrateful, accused me of betraying all he had done for me, the ultimate contradiction. Trying to kill his mother, while convincing himself he'd done something for her. That night, in the empty house, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. I cried for the child I had lost, for the wasted years, for love betrayed. But most of all, I cried for the naive, pliant woman who had been blind to growing evil. When my tears dried, I decided. Ryan was right about one thing. I had been weak, but that weak woman died that night. Tomorrow, a new Lisa would be born. A Lisa who learned that boundless love is not virtue, but complicity. A Lisa who understood that to protect herself she might need to become what her enemies least expect. The phone rang. It was Richard Evans, the family lawyer. Lisa, he said. Emily called me. She told me everything. Are you okay? For the first time in days, I smiled. Perfect. Richard and I have work for you. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was complete. Over the following weeks, while Ryan assumed he had broken me, I quietly laid the groundwork for revenge. The first step was moving. I could not continue living in the house where I had raised a snake, where every corner reminded me of my own naivety. Richard helped me find an apartment in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, a penthouse with panoramic views, a month's rent higher than 3 months of Ryan's salary. When I signed the lease and saw the broker's surprise, I merely smiled. This is for retirement. I gave myself a gift. Retirement. A word that tasted like freedom. I retired from being a mother, from being a victim, from always giving without asking for anything in return. The apartment was splendid. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen, like something out of a magazine. But my favorite place was the study. A quiet space where I could plan, think, and become the strategist Ryan had never imagined. Richard was my first ally in this new life. For years he'd handled small legal matters for me, wills, insurance, paperwork. But now, I needed more. I needed a legal warrior, someone who could use the system itself to destroy the man who tried to kill me. Lisa, he said, at our first serious meeting. This is going to get brutal. Ryan won't give up easily. He'll fight, lie, manipulate. I leaned back in the leather chair and looked him in the eye. Richard, he's underestimated me for 40 years. Now it's my turn to surprise him. The first thing we did was protect my money. Ryan knew about the main account, but he didn't know I had 3 other accounts, nor was he aware of the savings bonds I had carefully renewed each year. He also had no idea I owned stocks, bought with the savings from my weekend side jobs. While he was busy mocking the stupid old mother, I had built a small but solid financial empire. In total, Richard said after reviewing all the papers, we're looking at nearly $4 million. Not $2 million like he thought. $4 million. 40 years of sacrifice turned into financial strength. 40 years of living like a pauper so I could die like a queen. But money was only a tool. The real weapon was information. Richard hired a private investigator, Robert Hall, a former detective who specialized in family cases. What we discovered over the next few weeks left me speechless. Ryan hadn't just planned to kill me for the inheritance he was drowning in debt. Gambling debts, debts to loan sharks, the kind of debt that made murdering his own mother seem like a survival necessity. "Here's the evidence," Robert said, handing me a thick file filled with photos, documents, and bank statements. "Your son owes more than $500,000 to some very dangerous people, the kind who never accept apologies." The photos showed Ryan in casinos in Las Vegas, at illegal betting dens, and in shady, late-night meetings with men whose faces radiated menace. He had mortgaged Emily's house without her knowledge, pawned her car, and even drained their children's savings accounts to pay off interest on his mountain of debt. My son wasn't just a failed murderer, he was a thief, one who had stolen his own family's future. "Emily doesn't know a thing," Robert Hall, the investigator, continued. "He's been lying to her for months. Told her he was having problems at work, said his paycheck was delayed, that they needed to tighten their budget. But in reality, he was taking the mortgage money to gamble." The information was horrifying and perfect. Ryan had built his own prison out of lies and addiction. All I had to do was give it a gentle push, and it would all collapse. Meanwhile, he thought he had won. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation at my sister Margaret's house, and I had vanished completely. No phone calls, no visits, no tears. In his mind, that meant I was weak, terrified. But in truth, every day I worked tirelessly from my new penthouse in Seattle. Richard Evans, my attorney, and I mapped out every step of our strategy. Each night, I read reports from Robert, learning more about the monster I had raised. Each morning, I planned the next phase of my carefully calculated revenge. The first phase was psychological. I needed Ryan to believe he was in control, that he had won. I needed him complacent, lowering his guard. So I stayed silent, letting him think I was somewhere out there, crying in despair. Richard explained the legal process. "We have undeniable proof of the poisoning the kid's toxicology results, Emily's testimony, and the recording of his confession." Yes, I had recorded the entire conversation at Margaret's house with a small device Robert had hidden in my handbag. "But," Richard added, "a criminal case will be long and messy. There'll be media attention, public scrutiny, and scandal. Are you ready for that?" I smiled. After 40 years of living in the shadows, I was ready to step into the light and show the world who Ryan really was. Richard's smile turned sharp. "We also have evidence of fraud and financial deception. We can destroy him economically before the criminal trial even starts." The word economically sounded delicious. He wanted to kill me for money, and now he would lose all his money for trying to kill me. During those silent weeks, I also began to change myself. I hired Julia Carter, a personal stylist, to completely rebuild my image. Goodbye to the old conservative clothes. Goodbye to the lifeless gray hair. Goodbye to the stooped posture of a woman who had been beaten down. When Julia was done, I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. My chestnut brown hair, cut neatly, made me look nearly 10 years younger. My style was refined and confident tailored suits, Italian leather shoes, and small but exquisite accessories. "You look like a powerful woman," Julia said, admiring her work. A powerful woman. Those 2 words sent a thrilling shiver through me. For 40 years, I had been a woman of service, of sacrifice, of shadows. Now, it was time to become a woman of power. The final and most important element was attitude. I hired a mindset coach, Dr. Lauren Mitchell, who specialized in women's empowerment. "Lisa, she said during our first session. You have to stop seeing yourself as a victim. You're a survivor. You're a warrior. Those sessions were eye-opening. For decades, I had confused love with submission, kindness with weakness, motherhood with self-erasure. I had created a monster simply because I was too afraid of being seen as a bad mother if I ever dared to set boundaries. Doctor, Lauren was right. Real love comes with consequences. If there are no consequences for bad behavior, that's not love, that's enabling. For 40 years, I had enabled my son to become a sociopath, but not anymore. The new Lisa no longer enabled anyone. She was a storm gathering strength, ready to descend upon Ryan's world like a hurricane of reckoning. One night, exactly 1 month after the confrontation, I decided to make my first public appearance. I chose the setting carefully, the most luxurious art gallery in Seattle, hosting an exclusive contemporary exhibition. I wore a tailored black suit, high heels, and the sparkling jewelry I had bought that very afternoon. When the black Lincoln pulled up to the entrance, the society photographers turned to look at me. They didn't recognize me, but instinctively, they knew I mattered. I walked slowly past the paintings, a glass of champagne in hand, chatting with collectors and critics. For the first time in decades, I felt like I truly belonged, elegant, confident, and powerful. Then, I heard a familiar voice. Ryan, across the room, with Emily. She looked tense and out of place, clearly uncomfortable in such a refined setting. He was trying to impress a few businessmen, likely his next marks for financial scams. Our eyes met across the room. I saw sheer terror in his when he realized who I was. The weak, defeated woman he had left a month ago had transformed into something entirely different, poised, confident, and commanding enough to leave him speechless. I walked toward him, each step deliberate and steady, savoring every second of the power shift. When I reached him, I smiled, a sweet smile, laced with poison. Hello, Ryan. What a surprise to see you here. My voice carried a calm authority he had never heard before. His face drained of color, while Emily looked at me with a mix of confusion and awe. The businessman turned curiously toward us. Mom, what are you doing here? He stammered, his voice trembling. For the first time in his life, my presence frightened him. I took a sip of champagne and said smoothly, I'm enjoying my retirement. It's time I treat myself a little. The word retirement hung in the air like a veiled threat wrapped in sophistication. Everyone around us could feel the tension, but they also sensed that I was no longer the fragile woman they might have imagined. Retirement from what exactly? One man asked politely. I smiled, keeping my eyes locked on Ryan. From being too generous. Sometimes, when you give too much, people forget how to appreciate it. And eventually, you have to stop giving and start taking back. The phrase taking back lingered in the air like the quiet warning of an approaching storm. Ryan understood exactly what I meant. He knew the era of taking was over and the hunt had begun, with him as the prey. The following days were suffocatingly tense. Ryan knew something had shifted, but he couldn't figure out what. The image of me that night haunted him endlessly. The mother he once despised had become a force he could no longer control. He started calling me nonstop, but I never answered. I let every call go to voicemail, where I could hear the growing fear in his voice. Mom, please pick up. We need to talk. I need to know what you're planning. For the first time in his life, he was afraid of me. For the first time, I was the hunter. Meanwhile, my lawyer, Richard Evans, had begun the legal phase of the revenge plan. First, he filed a civil lawsuit for attempted murder, backed by all the evidence, the children's medical test results, the recording of his confession, Emily's sworn statement, the doctor's reports. Lisa, Richard said, this case is going to be a media storm. The whole city will be talking about it. Good, I replied. I want the entire world to know who Ryan really is. I wanted his neighbors, his co-workers, his friends, to know that he had tried to murder his own mother. But the civil lawsuit was just the appetizer. The main course was the file. Robert Hall, the investigator, had finished a compilation of every crime Ryan had committed. Mortgage fraud, embezzlement, financial scams, tax evasion. He had built a paper castle of deceit, and with one small push, it would all come crashing down. Here's the full evidence, Robert said, handing me 3 thick binders. Your son's been stealing from his family for months. Emily can sue him for marital fraud and reclaim every asset he took. Marital fraud. Those 2 words sounded deliciously poetic. I decided to meet Emily in person. Despite our past conflicts, she was a victim too deceived, exploited, robbed of her future. And most importantly, she was the mother of the 2 children who had almost died because of their own father. I invited her to lunch at an upscale restaurant in downtown Seattle. When she walked in, her eyes widened in surprise at the sight of me. I was no longer the meek, accommodating mother-in-law she once knew. I was a powerful woman, and I held all the cards. Emily, I said after ordering, we need to talk. She nodded, visibly uneasy. She knew something serious was coming. I know everything, I said calmly. About Ryan's debts, the gambling, the loan sharks, the mortgage he took out on the house in your name without telling you. Her face turned pale. How do you know? She stammered. Because I hired an investigator? I replied, my voice cold as steel. Because I decided to stop being the victim and become the predator. I handed her one of the files Robert had prepared. It's all here, documents, photos, bank statements. She opened it, page by page, tears streaming down her face. Each sheet was another knife of betrayal. Her husband had not only tried to poison his own mother, but had stolen his family's future to feed his gambling addiction. Lisa. I had no idea, Emily sobbed. He told me he was having problems at work, that we needed to save money. I never thought. Her voice broke between sobs, that he would destroy our lives. I reached across the table and took her hand. But now, we have a chance to take back justice. I laid out the plan. She could file for marital fraud, reclaim the house, and secure her children's future. I would cover all the legal expenses, but under one condition. I need you to testify. Tell the whole truth about the box of chocolates, the confession, everything you witnessed. Emily didn't hesitate for even a second. Of course, it's the least I can do after everything you've endured. As we were eating, Ryan walked into the restaurant. It wasn't a coincidence. He had been following Emily, terrified of what might come from a meeting between his wife and his mother. When he saw us sitting together, exchanging documents, his face drained of color, he hurried toward the table, his voice trembling. What's going on here? What are you 2 talking about? The desperation in his tone was almost tangible. He knew his world of lies was collapsing. We're talking about you, I said, smiling coldly. About the debts, the lies, and how you stole from your own family. Ryan stared at the pile of documents on the table, his face turning white. Emily, he begged, don't listen to that crazy old woman. She's manipulating you, trying to tear us apart. Even in panic, he couldn't stop insulting me. Ryan, Emily said, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. I know everything. The gambling, the debts, the mortgage. I know you've been lying to me for months. He tried to interrupt, but she cut him off. And I know you tried to kill your mother. Those words echoed through the restaurant. Everyone stopped eating and turned to stare. A wave of whispers rippled across the room. Ryan, realizing every eye was on him, lowered his voice. Emily, please, we can work this out. Don't let her ruin everything. She's always tried to divide us, always blaming others, never taking responsibility. No, Emily said firmly. Not anymore. The lies end here. I'll protect our children, and that means keeping them far away from you. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and said, My lawyer will contact you. Then she walked out, leaving him frozen in the middle of the room. When Emily disappeared from sight, he turned to me, his eyes bloodshot with rage. This is all your fault. You destroyed my marriage. You ruined my family. I looked straight into his eyes, my voice calm and icy. I didn't destroy anything. I just exposed the truth. Your marriage fell apart because you're a liar and a thief. Your family collapsed when you decided to kill your own mother. I stood, still holding his gaze. And this is only the beginning. As I walked out, his voice erupted behind me. You'll regret this. You'll pay for ruining my life. Ruin his life? No. He had tried to destroy mine, and now he was simply tasting justice. That evening, Richard Evans called. Lisa, the lawsuit has been accepted. The press has started reaching out. They want to interview you. Good. It's time the world knew the truth. The first interview was with Seattle's largest news channel. I appeared on television, neatly dressed, carrying the confident air of a woman who had found her strength. The anchor looked at me with curiosity and respect. Miss Lisa, please tell us, how did you discover your son tried to poison you? I told everything. The box of chocolates, Ryan's reaction, the children being poisoned, his cold confession. I spoke gently, without melodrama, letting the facts speak for themselves. So how does a mother feel when she learns her son wanted to kill her? The reporter asked. I smiled. She feels free. Free from the illusion that bound her for 40 years. Free from having to protect someone who never protected her. The interview spread across America. Within hours, my story was national news. Hundreds of women emailed and mailed letters, sharing stories of ungrateful children, toxic families, betrayed love. But what satisfied me most was Ryan's reaction. Co-workers began whispering, realizing he was the man who tried to murder his mother. Neighbors looked at him with contempt. Friends distanced themselves. The shame followed him like a shadow. When he went to the supermarket, people pointed and whispered. At work, colleagues avoided him. When he left the house, he could feel the neighborhood's scornful stares. I knew, though, this was only the beginning. Public humiliation felt good, but the real justice was still to come. The lawsuits, the asset seizures, and the complete collapse of the life he had built on lies and betrayal. Ryan had badly misjudged the woman he called Mom for 40 years. He thought he could discard me like trash, but he had awakened a monster far stronger and less forgiving than himself. The hunt had officially begun, and I was the predator who had waited 40 years to bear her claws. Richard Evans's case moved like an unstoppable avalanche. He filed every charge at once: attempted murder, family financial fraud, corporate financial fraud, and a civil suit seeking $5 million in damages. On Monday morning, Ryan woke up to find his life shattered. His bank accounts were frozen immediately. The meager savings left after his gambling addiction were locked pending investigation. His wages were garnished to secure payment for the civil suit. Overnight, he had not a penny to his name. Richard called me, his voice full of satisfaction. Lisa, your son is officially bankrupt. He can't afford private counsel. The court must appoint a public defender for him. A failed would-be murderer, facing one of Seattle's top law firms. The battle was lopsided from the start. But what pleased me most was watching his world crumble piece by piece. My interview video went viral to the point that national press began digging deeper. Soon, all his gambling debts, schemes against coworkers, and systematic lies were exposed in the papers. His boss called him into the office. "Ryan, the company can't have its name tied to a scandal like this. You're fired effective immediately." 20 years of his career gone in an instant, wiped out by greed and guilt. When the loan sharks saw the news, they realized they needed to act fast if they wanted their money back. They began calling, texting, and showing up at his house day and night. That evening, as I sipped a glass of red wine in my Seattle penthouse, Emily called, her voice trembling through the phone. "Lisa, armed men just came to the house. They said if Ryan doesn't pay by tomorrow, they'll take the house and everything inside it." "Where's Ryan?" I asked. "He ran," she sobbed. "When they showed up, he slipped out the back door, left me and the kids behind. A coward to the core, willing to abandon his own family to save himself." "Emily, listen to me. Take the kids to your mother's tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'll handle the rest." It was time for my next move. The next morning, I arrived at Ryan's house with my lawyer Richard and 2 bodyguards I'd hired. The loan sharks were inside, rummaging through furniture, appraising what they could seize. When they saw me, the leader, a large man with a scar on his arm, approached. "You family of Ryan?" he asked. I answered calmly, "I'm his mother, and I'm here to make a deal." I pulled a signed check from my purse. "This is the full amount. He owes you $35,000. Take it, and forget he ever existed." They stared at the check, stunned. No one expected a well-dressed woman like me to show up holding that kind of money. "Why would you do this for him?" the leader asked. "I'm not doing it for him," I said flatly. "I'm doing it for Emily and my grandchildren. They don't deserve to suffer for a gambler's sins." He examined the check, then nodded. "Deal. Your son's debt is cleared." When they left, Emily stepped out, tears streaming down her face. "Lisa, I can't let you pay Ryan's debt." I smiled, meeting her eyes. "I didn't pay it for him. I paid it for you and the kids, and it's not free." I handed her a folder Richard Evans had prepared. "These are the transfer papers. From now on, the house is yours. Ryan has no legal rights to it." Then I gave her another document. "This is a loan agreement. You owe me $530,000, but you can pay it back over 20 years. A perfect arrangement." Emily and the kids were safe, with a roof over their heads, while Ryan had lost his last asset. When he came back, he would find he owned nothing. That afternoon, he called me. His voice shook with desperation. "Mom, please help me. The loan sharks will kill me if I don't pay. I need your help. I need your forgiveness." I cut him off coldly. "I already paid your debt." On the other end, I heard his relieved sigh. "Thank you, Mom. I knew you'd never abandon me. I knew it. I didn't do it for you." I interrupted, my voice like ice. "I did it for Emily and the kids. And by the way, you don't have the house anymore. I transferred the ownership into your wife's name." Absolute silence filled the line. "What?" he stammered. "The house isn't yours anymore. Your wife owes me the money, and you have no legal connection to that property." I could hear him gasp, choking on his anger. "You can't do that, Mom. That's my house. I bought it." "With stolen money?" I replied, calm but cutting. "Now it's back with its rightful owners. Emily and the children are protected. As for you, that's your problem." I hung up before he could say more. The following days were sweet. Ryan came to the house, but Emily had changed the locks. When he tried to force the door, she called the police. The officers arrived and made it clear, "Sir, your wife has filed a restraining order. You are not allowed within 200 meters of this property." Emily had followed my advice to the letter. Now Ryan had not only lost the house, he was legally barred from coming near his wife and children. He became completely ostracized, shunned by society, abandoned by his family. No house, no job, no money. He was forced to live in cheap motels on the outskirts of Seattle, but even that didn't last. The media closed in. Reporters bombarded him with questions about the poisoning, the debts, the gambling. One night, desperate, he had what he thought was a smart idea: to go live online and tell his side of the story. In a moldy, filthy hotel room, he spoke to his phone camera. "My mother is crazy. She's making this up for attention. I never poisoned anyone. The box of chocolates was totally normal. She's manipulating my whole family against me." But the internet is not so easily fooled. Viewers flooded the chat with rapid-fire questions. "So why was there arsenic in the chocolates? Why were your children poisoned? What evidence shows your mother is lying?" He couldn't answer. The live stream went viral, but not the way he hoped. It spread as a textbook. Example of pathological narcissism. A public confession from a man who couldn't own his crimes. Comments were brutal. "This guy thinks we're stupid?" His wife accuses him, and he still denies it. Classic psychopath. A sick man who always blames others. But the question that undid him completely was simple. If you're innocent, why don't you sue your mother for defamation? He fell silent. Because he knew I had all the evidence. He couldn't deny the poisoning. The proof was indisputable, and that silence read like a confession. The broadcast ended abruptly after he received death threats live on air. He had tried to manipulate public opinion and succeeded only in destroying himself. The next day, clips of his live stream were all over the national news. Psychologists dissected him as a case study in antisocial personality disorder. People called him a public self-saboteur, a man who had torched his own reputation on the internet. Ryan did what Lisa never needed a PR team to accomplish. He destroyed his own reputation with his own hands. He became the country's poster child for the ungrateful son. But for me, the most satisfying thing wasn't his downfall. It was the calm in Emily's eyes when I visited, the safe smiles on my grandchildren's faces, and the peace in my soul after so many years living in a toxic family. Legal justice was still unfolding, but poetic justice was already complete. The son who once tried to kill me for money now didn't have a single dime. The man who once mocked a mother's love now begged for forgiveness. The manipulator now shunned by the world. And I, the woman who had stayed silent for 40 years, had finally found her voice. The following months felt like a rebirth. My luxurious Seattle apartment became a sanctuary, a place where I could breathe without fear or control. Richard Evans kept me updated on the case's progress. "Lisa, the prosecutor is very interested in charging Ryan with attempted murder. The evidence is overwhelming," he continued firmly. "Everything is solid: the recording, the medical reports, his own confession. Even his public defender is negotiating a plea deal because he knows he can't win. A guilty plea would mean Ryan admitting in open court that he had plotted to kill his own mother. But what satisfied me most wasn't that it was watching Emily come back to life after escaping her toxic marriage. No more lies, no more financial pressure, no more psychological manipulation. She had returned to being the strong woman I once knew. "Lisa," she told me one afternoon as we lunched on the patio of a small cafe on Bainbridge Island, "for the first time in years, I feel free. The kids are happy. They sleep soundly every night. They laugh again, real laughter. Seeing my grandchildren smile, reclaiming their childhood to me, that was worth more than any revenge. One afternoon, as I sipped coffee on my balcony, my phone rang. It was Margaret, my sister. Her voice was heavy with guilt and shame. Lisa, I need to talk to you. I need to apologize. I agreed to meet her. When Margaret arrived, the contrast between us was striking. I was calm, elegant, confident. She was weary, burdened by remorse. Lisa, she said, tears streaming down her face. I knew Ryan had problems, but I never imagined he could try to kill you. Margaret, you always knew something wasn't right. You kept protecting him, shielding him from the consequences of his own actions. She nodded, unable to deny it. I know. I was complicit. I failed you. What hurts most is, I gave him shelter after he poisoned you. I knew what he'd done, and I still defended him. Her tears were genuine, her regret, undeniable, but it was too late. Margaret, I said, not with bitterness, but with finality. For 40 years, you chose to protect a monster instead of your own sister. You're sorry now, but that doesn't erase everything. She left in tears, and I felt at peace. I had spoken my truth, and for the first time in my life, I had drawn a clear boundary. 6 months after the poisoning, the criminal trial officially began. The media followed every detail, every testimony, every piece of evidence. I took the witness stand with calm composure and quiet pride that commanded respect. Mrs. Lisa, the prosecutor asked, how did you feel when you learned your son had planned to kill you? I looked straight at Ryan, my eyes free of fear. I felt liberated from 40 years of manipulation, from 40 years of loving someone who never knew how to love back. Ryan looked thin, worn out, and utterly defeated. His public defender did everything possible, but the evidence was undeniable. Emily's testimony, the medical reports from the children's doctors, and the forensic analysis of the box of chocolates together, they formed an airtight case. When it was his turn to speak, Ryan tried one last act. I love my mother. This was all just a misunderstanding. I never wanted to hurt her. The prosecutor then played the recording that exposed his entire murder plan. Ryan's performance collapsed completely. The jury took only 2 hours to deliver their verdict. Guilty of first-degree attempted murder. Guilty of endangering minors. Guilty of financial fraud. Sentence: 12 years in prison, with no parole for the first 8 years. When I heard the sentence, I didn't feel joy, only a deep, quiet peace. Justice had been served. The court had affirmed what I already knew, that I had been the victim of a deliberate attempt on my life by my own son. Ryan looked at me as they handcuffed him. The arrogance was gone. Only despair and self-pity remained. "Mom," he screamed, "you're still my mother. You can't just abandon me like this." I stood still, watching him being led away, walking toward the fate he had chosen himself. The civil cases wrapped up quickly afterward. The emotional damages lawsuit awarded me $3 million, money he could never pay from prison, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that the court recognized what I had endured. Emily was granted a divorce and full custody of the children. Ryan lost all parental rights after being convicted of endangering them. My grandchildren were finally protected by the law, free from his toxic influence. One afternoon, as I was organizing papers, I found an old letter I had once written to Ryan, thanking him for being the most wonderful son. I read it and let out a bitter laugh. How blind I had been, how naive. Then I decided to write a new letter to myself. Dear Lisa, For 40 years, you confused love with complicity, kindness with weakness, sacrifice with virtue. Today, you understand, and you finally know how to love yourself. That year on my birthday, I hosted a small celebration in my Seattle penthouse. Emily and the kids came, along with Richard Evans, my lawyer, Julia, my stylist, and Robert, the private investigator. They were the people who helped me rebuild my life and stood beside me in that moment. When I blew out the candles, I made a silent wish. May no woman ever have to wait until she's 65 to find her strength to finally say enough, to protect her heart from those who exploit her love. That night, alone in my apartment, I reflected on the journey behind me, from the gentle, submissive mother to the strong, self-assured woman, from the silent victim to the woman who values herself. That woman, me, Lisa, had learned that self-love isn't selfishness, it's survival. Ryan had tried to kill me for money, but instead, he awakened something far greater. A wiser, stronger woman who knows how to protect herself and fight for her own life. Legal justice had been served, but the real victory was an inner one. I had regained my dignity, my independence, and my right to live without fear or manipulation. 2 years after the sentencing, my life reached a balance I once thought impossible. The emotional wounds had healed not because I forgot, but because I learned to understand and transform the pain. I woke up each morning free of the heaviness of fear, brewed my own coffee, and read the financial news because now I managed my own assets. My attorney, Richard, introduced me to Oscar, an ethical financial advisor who taught me that money can be a tool of freedom, not just a means of survival. Lisa, he said during one of our meetings, you have enough capital to live comfortably for the rest of your life and to leave behind a meaningful inheritance. The word inheritance, which had once nearly cost me my life, now carried an entirely different meaning. I decided to establish a trust fund for my grandchildren, managed by Emily until they turned 25. I also created a charitable foundation to help elderly women who were victims of domestic abuse. My tragedy had become a mission. Every weekend, my grandchildren came to visit. The light in their eyes as they walked through the door was the best medicine for any sadness that lingered. Grandma, little Anna asked me, why doesn't Dad live with us anymore? It was a difficult question, but Emily and I had learned to answer it gently and truthfully. Your dad made some choices that hurt people. When someone hurts others, they have to go to a special place to learn how to be better. The children accepted that answer with innocent hearts, though I knew one day they would need to know more. One afternoon, while playing with on them at Volunteer Park, I saw an elderly woman sitting alone on a bench. Her face carried sorrow and emptiness, a feeling I once knew all too well. I walked over and started a conversation. My name's Joanne, she said. I live with my son and daughter-in-law, but I feel invisible. They treat me like a burden. Her story struck me deeply. It was like looking at a reflection of my former self. I told Joanne my story not with bitterness or anger, but with truth and compassion from someone who had walked out of the darkness. Joanne, I said, you don't have to accept being treated like a burden. You have rights, worth, and choices. From that conversation, an idea began to take shape. I started hosting weekly gatherings at my Seattle apartment for elderly women who were abused or isolated in their own families. We called it the Circle of Strength. Every Thursday afternoon, my living room filled with stories of survival, empathy, and reborn sisterhood. Attorney Richard Evans helped me officially register the Lisa Foundation for the Dignity of Women. Our first project was a shelter for elderly women escaping abuse. The second was a program providing free legal assistance. The media began reaching out for interviews about elder abuse. My story spread so powerfully that I became a voice for forgotten women. Domestic violence doesn't always leave bruises on the skin, I said during one televised interview. Sometimes it's emotional, financial, or psychological. Then one morning, exactly 3 years after the poisoning, I received a letter from the Washington State Penitentiary. It was from Ryan. My first instinct was to throw it away without reading, but curiosity won. I opened it, my hands slightly trembling. Dear Mom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know I've been thinking a lot about what I've done. The letter was filled with what looked like sincere apologies, promises to change, but the tone was all too familiar. Still, the same subtle manipulation, still the same attempt to evoke pity. I'm getting therapy. The doctor says I carry deep wounds from childhood, from losing Dad, from feeling abandoned. Even in prison, he found ways to blame others instead of taking responsibility. Mom, please give me a chance to make things right. Please come visit me. I need your forgiveness so I can heal. I need, I need, I need. Always, I need. Never once had he asked, "What do you need?" I brought the letter to Dr. Lauren, the therapist who had guided me through my recovery. After reading it, she looked up and asked, "Lisa, how do you feel reading this?" I answered calmly, "I feel sad, but not for him. I'm sad that after 3 years in prison, he still doesn't truly understand what he's done." "Will you reply?" Dr. Lauren asked. "Will you visit him?" I thought about her question for days. Part of me, the mother who had existed for 40 years, felt she should answer. But the new woman, the one reborn from the ashes, knew that my healing didn't depend on forgiving the man who had tried to kill me. In the end, I decided to write a letter, but not the one he was expecting. Ryan, I received your letter. I'm glad to hear you're reflecting on your actions. However, my healing journey doesn't require seeing you, nor forgiving you. I've built a full, meaningful life without you in it. I've found peace, purpose, and joy. Your absence isn't a void. It's a quiet space of calm. I hope you find your own path to redemption, but mine no longer includes saving you from the consequences you created. I signed simply. Lisa, no longer Mom. That title was taken away the day he chose to become his mother's would-be killer. When I mailed the letter, I felt a deep sense of release. I had finally closed the last chapter of that toxic bond. Emily had also rebuilt her life. She began studying psychology at the University of Washington, inspired by the tragedy our family had endured. I want to help other families recognize manipulation before it's too late, she said. Her transformation from a silent victim to a proactive protector was remarkable. My grandchildren, Anna and Luke, grew up healthy and happy. Sometimes they asked about their father, but without the fear or confusion they once carried. Stability and love had replaced the chaos of their early years. One afternoon, while reviewing the Foundation's reports, I discovered something incredible. In just 2 years, we had helped more than 200 elderly women escape domestic abuse. Some reclaimed property stolen by their own children. Others found the courage to report their abusers, and all of them rediscovered their dignity. My story of survival had become a beacon of hope for hundreds of other women. The murder plot that was meant to silence me forever ended up amplifying my voice louder than ever before. That night, as I stood on the balcony overlooking the glowing lights of Seattle, I thought about life's perfect irony. Ryan wanted to kill me to steal my wealth, yet he had unknowingly helped me build a real legacy, an organization that would outlive me and help generations of women discover their own strength. The woman I once was, she died the day that poisoned box of chocolates arrived. From those ashes, a new Lisa was born stronger, wiser, and whole. I understood then. Sometimes, to find the light, one must walk through the darkest night. My revenge was complete, not through Ryan's destruction, but through my own rebirth. The greatest revenge is building an extraordinary life. Ryan wanted to erase me to claim my money, But instead, he awakened the power within me. He wanted to silence me forever, but he made my voice rise into a chorus and the voices of women who stood up and became strong. I wrote in my journal that night, I don't regret raising him. I only regret not realizing sooner that kindness should never come at the cost of self-destruction. My son once wanted to kill me, but instead of destroying me, he freed me to become the woman I was always meant to be. The story had ended, but its legacy had only begun. Every woman who found her strength through our Foundation's programs was a victory against the mindset Ryan represented. Every boundary set, every firm no, every act of self-love was a quiet revolution against a culture that teaches women to sacrifice everything and expect nothing in return. It took me 65 years to find my strength, but I've spent the next 10 making sure other women won't have to wait as long as I did. That is my true legacy. Not wealth, but wisdom. Not possessions, but purpose. Not revenge, but triumph through transformation. But the pain of a betrayed mother and her journey to reclaim her strength, that is very real. What about you? If it were your life, would you choose silence to keep the peace, or speak up to reclaim your dignity? There are no easy answers, only the path your heart guides you toward. Lisa learned that forgiveness is not weakness, but faith, and faith that God blesses those who live truthfully from the heart. May each of us find our own light, no matter how dark the path we walk through. Thank you for watching Stay with the channel, and don't forget to check out the 2 featured videos waiting on the end screen.